Hey everyone, I'm very excited to do an unboxing and in-depth review of the RG35XX. This just arrived in the post now. I ordered the purple one, so let's see how it pans out. So just for, one thing just to mention is the boxing experience. They've gone for this minimalist look with their Anbernic logo, and I like it, and the box opens nicely, which kind of adds to that sort of initial experience. And then you're presented with the device in this plastic, just kind of usual suspects for Anbernic. I'm really excited about this device. And they do this for a bit of protection. And there we go. So now I went for the purple one. Just looking at it in the studio, I can see the purple. But when you face it straight up like that, it kind of looks white. It is a very light purple. I was quite excited. I've never had a purple device before. I'll try enhance it in post-production to show it off exactly as I saw it now in the studio. But it is really nice. It's a little bit on the light side. I would have liked it to be a slightly deeper purple, but I like it. It's really nice. And then the other thing, being a Miyoo Mini user, you're immediately introduced to this really big screen. The screen is pretty big. Here's the Miyoo Mini. It's quite a big difference, Okay, so I'm going to just quickly finish the unboxing here. So we've got the tray. We've got a manual. I'm definitely going to inspect this because my 351V video, I'm still busy working on it, but I wasn't very impressed with the manual, especially in conjunction with the firmware. So we're going to look at that. And then a screen guard. I'm actually going to put the screen guard on. I didn't put it on my 351V, but I'm going to do this now. What I want to say from the beginning is that what I want to focus on this video with the RG35XX is to check now. They've done their own firmware. They've done their own manual. I want to see if this device works from the beginning. Just use it out of the box if it's an easy to use device and a fun device to use. So that's my focus for this video for today. On the top, you're greeted with this mini HDMI port. So we're going to test to see how well that works with the stock firmware. On the side, we've got the TF card for the firmware. You've got another TF slot for ROMs. And then you've got your power button and your reset button. The reset button is recessed. The power button it sticks out slightly from the body. On the bottom, you've got your headphone jack and you've got your charging port, and they do say that it supports gamepad, so you can plug in a gamepad. So we'll have to, at a later stage, test to see if that works with the stock firmware. And then you've got the volume rocker, which also, unlike the RG351V, actually juts out a little bit, which I like quite a bit. It gives you a bit of tactile feedback when you're playing to feel where the top and the bottom of the button is. Okay, and then on the back, we've got the shoulder buttons. These shoulder buttons have got a soft click to them. Let me just raise it to this mic here. So to give you an idea, the RG351V, I'm going to click these next to the mic. That difference of a sharp click to a dull click will make these less, in a quiet room or whatever, you're not going to be playing and going, it's going to be less annoying to the people around you for sure. The one thing though is on such a small device to use these trigger buttons. So what you need to do is these are level, as you can see. Well, they flush with one another. That's very, very, very slightly raised, almost unnoticeably raised from L1 to L2 or R1 to R2. Now, when you're playing it, to reach over there, so watch my fingers. I have to move my hand and get the fingers across. So just like I suspected, as I was saying in my RG351V video, is that I don't like this design. Compared to this design, I really think they should have stuck with this design. I think it's the lesser of all the evils, this raised manner in which they made this. But yeah, I'm not a fan of these new trigger buttons, but they are what they are, and a device like this doesn't need a lot of trigger buttons, so it's not the end of the world. And then on the face we've got, now we have shiny buttons as opposed to Anbernic's usual matte finish buttons that they usually have on their devices. So we've got shiny buttons here, maybe just to compete with the Miyoo Mini shiny buttons. Not that I like them. I actually prefer the buttons on the RG351V. And these face buttons, these action buttons, they've got more of a, like the, you know, the dome click that you get with, I think it's the Sony devices. But it definitely is a rubber membrane under there, but it's got more of a clicky feel compared to, let's say, for instance, the Miyoo Mini. Miyoo Mini is a bit of a softer press. So there's a bit of like a little, you can hear it's got a bit of like a click to it. Very, very dull click to it. Start and select also have a little bit of resistance to them, not very mushy. This menu button is mushy. And then this D-pad, let's have a look. You know, let's look at the travel on this D-pad. You can see the center stays center and it doesn't drop. So you're not losing anything there, and you're not going to accidentally press sideways when you're pressing downwards or the vice versa. So that's good. It's got a little bit of resistance. My favorite device so far is the RG351V, which has a little bit of resistance, and I would say this has got quite a bit of wear and tear on it. I would say these two devices have got the same D-pad almost. This has got a slightly more matte finish to the RG351V. So this D-pad is actually matte finish, and so are these buttons, as opposed to the shiny action buttons or face buttons. But it has a little bit of resistance to it. It's not super mushy. And in my opinion, this is a very nice D-pad. It's a really nice D-pad for this style of device with no analog sticks or anything. You're going to be playing Street Fighter games with it. Feels fine for that, you know, combination moves. A little bit, you know, if I had to do that, you're going to catch on the edge of this D-pad. But overall, I just like the resistance and the feeling of it. It is a very nice D-pad. Okay. That is just a disclaimer, not after a lot of use. You know, I've literally just gotten this, and I'm spending a couple of hours now testing it for this video. This has text on the body here. Select, start, menu, A, B, X, Y. And I kind of like that, because you know, eventually you know what this is going to be, and you can barely see that text. So it just gets you started when you first get the device. Over time, I don't know if it's going to wear off, but you know, it's just very subtle, which I like. I'm a fan of that. Okay, and then the shake test. So I'm first going to shake the Miyoo Mini. So I'm going to directly compare it to the Miyoo Mini. I hate how much the Miyoo Mini shakes. It really sounds like you've got a box of screws or something in my pocket. I've just been to the hardware store. It really is that bad. So I hate that. And Anbernic devices, this is the RG351V, not too bad, but they have historically, RG351V, they have historically been quite bad with shaking. Here's my 350M, which was quite bad. Here is the RG35XX. So you've got a rattle, but it's a very low, because of the plastic they've used, it's not that bad. It's probably, out of all these devices, this has got the least horrible rattling, you know. And I saw the guy on Retro Handhelds he opened this up and put some electrical tape there, and he says it stops the rattling, and also there was something else about it moving around, so he sorted it out that way. But for me, it's acceptable. It would be nice not to rattle at all, but it's acceptable. Okay, moving on. So something I noticed is this has a 2100 milliamp hour battery, and that is the same as the Miyoo Mini. So the Miyoo Mini says 1900 milliamp hours, but if you open it up, it's a 2000 milliamp hour. So it's 100 short of the RG35XX, and this has got a bigger screen. So this definitely is going to have worse battery life than the Miyoo Mini. So that's, I haven't had time to test the battery life, but it's definitely going to be worse than the Miyoo Mini. And then, overall build quality. This build quality, I really love the RG280V, and one of the reasons is because of how well it's made. And I can't see much in the way of this being worse in terms of build quality to the RG280V. I would say maybe the plastic is fraction thinner, maybe. I was very impressed opening this up. Here's me squeezing the Miyoo Mini. There's a lot going on there when you squeeze it. This, literally silent. There's nothing going on when you squeeze this. So, very well made. Classic Anbernic, very well made device. And then the feeling in the hand. So vertical handhelds are never going to be the ideal setup for, like racing games and first person shooters and all that kind of thing. Not that you can play first person shooters on here, but it's not going to be the most ideal holding position. Especially if you want to play something that uses trigger buttons. I think that's going to be your best bet. And then you can kind of position, maybe you're using one trigger button, you get your finger in position there, and then you kind of find a comfortable holding position by gripping it between here, your joints here, and then using your fingers to play. I think that's going to be your ultimate holding position. But in the end, you mostly, as I do with my RG351V, you have your fingers underneath, use these little grip pads to grab it, and then play. I'm just noticing my fingers are using this as a ridge, which is quite nice. It's quite a nice holding position there, and then you play. And this is going to be an ultimate Game Boy and Game Boy Color device. And then Pocketability. So the Miyoo Mini is a mini device. So we need to start making categories for these devices. This is a mini device. This is just a small device. This is, there's the 280V. These two are pocketable, very pocketable. This is not as pocketable, but it is still a pocketable device. The problem with these new vertical devices of Anbernic is this ridge, the way it does this. I'm quickly going to, in the studio now, put it in my pockets. So you're not going to see anything, but I'm just having a look. The thing is, it does show in my pocket. You can see it there. You can see it kind of sitting in my pocket. And that is probably the reason why, if you are someone who collects these things and you do have a Miyoo Mini, that's probably going to be the one you throw in your pocket. However, this is just so much better made. And so in the end, you're going to feel safer putting this in your pocket than you are with the Miyoo Mini. So it isn't the most pocketable device in the world, but it is pocketable because it is still a very small device. Okay, so let's quickly do a little size comparison. So that gives you a feeling of it. This actually has the same size screen as the 351V, which is an accomplishment all of its own. To have the same size screen and have, because they don't have analog buttons, to have taken off that much of the chin. And it's so narrow, barely has any bezels. It really is a great feat of engineering. I'm really impressed with this device. In terms of the perfect size compact device, I think this is the ultimate. This is the most pocketable device out of 2022 and probably into 2023. But it is very difficult to play with this device because it is so small. But it is a nice thing just to, have in the car and waiting for your kids to do sports or whatever. There's a nice device for that. But I think in terms of a compromise between build quality, size, and pocketability and all that, this might have the upper hand. But anyway, that's up to you. That's it's really just a preference of how small you want to go. Yeah, I quickly just wanted to mention this because now I've been testing it now, and I don't know if you can see this in the way that the lenses sit. Let's do this. If you could draw attention to here, this button is quite raised, this power button. Now if you go here, this is extremely flush with the device. It is raised, but barely. And then here's the reset button, which is also just barely sticking out. And then you've got your volume rocker, which is also just barely sticking out of the body. That is a bit of a gripe with me in the RG351V. I really don't like that about this device. The 35XX has got, so the reset button is recessed, so that is difficult to reach. the power button over is sticking out and is easy to know. You know, you're holding it, you go, oh, I just want to quickly power it down or put it in sleep mode. That's there. And then the volume rocker also, it sticks out. There you go, you can see it. So it sticks out just enough for you to know, okay, that's the top, that's the bottom, and give you the ability to know where to press. Whereas here, you know, if you're changing the volume, you've got to really like sort of go, okay, there's the top. All right, put the volume up. And then pressing it is a mission. This is just nice. It's perfect. It really is perfect to press. Okay, let's do a light bleed test. There we go. The studio lights are off. It's pretty dark in here. And just looking at the device now, let's turn it to the side. There's a little bit of light coming through there. You can see the green light there. And obviously I do have the translucent device. A bit of light bleed there from the screen. But as you look at it from the front, I don't see any light bleed around the sides. And this is a see-through device. So that's pretty good. So quickly wanted to go over the manual because this in conjunction with the firmware is one of those things that take this the next step forward in being more user-friendly. I'm not saying that it's perfectly user-friendly, but compared to my previous Anbernic devices, this, you know, everything, all of these devices, I had to set up using videos by other YouTubers to get going. This is the first device where I think, okay, someone might get by with the manual and the firmware as it stands. And that's saying a lot. And so it guides you through, that's the introduction. It gives you an explanation of what each menu item does. And as I mentioned, it's pretty straightforward and it's got everything that you need. It guides you through the device. And this is the little thing I just wanted to point out is it's not perfect, but it tells you, okay, insert a FAT32 formatted memory card into the external slot. So for your ROMs and that, into the external slot, add a FAT32 formatted card, switch the device on, and a new folder for each platform will be created. Just put the game in the folder, i.e. plug it into a computer and put the game in, and your ROMs will play. And then it gives you a list of all the systems. Obviously, it's got the shortened formats, but you know, it is what it is. So I just wanted to mention that because I do think it is a step in the right direction for Anbernic. And then the other thing is the speaker placement. So this grill, it's got a little sort of drop off here. The Miyoo Mini, you know, literally it's only got two, there's a speaker grill here, but only two slots that are actually open for the speaker. And it is the place where you need to rest your thumb. And so, you know, as you're playing, you very often just like you'll press the B button and you'll completely block the speaker. There's very slim chance of that happening with the RG35XX because of where it's placed. So if you see my thumb, I'm bending here to press this button. Maybe, like if you're really sloppy, you're going to press that push over there. But this speaker grill is big. It's got a lot of slots open for it. It's firing to the front, and the chance of actually putting your thumb on it are very slim. So that is a really nicely placed speaker grill. Okay, let's time the power on. Put a timer on the screen now. And it's a Linux system, so it's pretty quick. What I firstly wanted to point out is how simple and straightforward this operating system is. And I think they might have taken a feather out of OS's cap. There's your game rooms, there's favorites, there's history. So you go in here and these are the games I've already tested. There's a search feature, and then all the things that you need to set on the device are here. So at first glance, at least, this is a very easy to use and straightforward operating system that is everything that you need. The one thing that I always say when I do these reviews is you need a favorites list. People are going to have thousands of games, and to have an operating system without a favorites list is completely useless. And then the history is also really nice, so you can just jump in at the last game you were playing, and then you know you've got thousands of games. To be able to search through them is a really good thing. And then there are all your platforms that you can use. This device I got with just one SD card, and I thought I wouldn't get games with it. I actually have a whole lot of games listed in here with artwork ready to roll. So that's, you know, At first glance, this really is nice. Where the problem comes in is where you have to tweak per game. So the per game settings is very limited. I can change the way that it renders. So I can go HD, I can go dot matrix, I can go fast, scanline. I can do those, but that's about it. I can change the brightness level, and then in some of these I can, let's just exit game. Some of these I can change the BIOS or the emulator that it's using. So only on some. So it is quite limited. And then also, you know, if you are a big snob when it kind of like, for instance, I really like to tweak my Game Boy games to look like Game Boy. This is just black and white. And then the only option you have is fast, which is, it's going to show you all the little pixels. You've got dot matrix, which is going to give you a dot matrix effect, which is a lot like original Game Boy. HD, which smooths it out, so it's like a shader. Then you've got scan lines, which gives the scan lines, that's more like a Game Boy Advance. And then fast, I'll probably settle on fast if that's all I had. But I like to make it green and all that sort of thing. A lot of people, this is not going to be an issue for. But for the hobbyists, this is an issue. Anyway, we're not going to spend too much time on that because I'm going to get into showing you how to update this firmware to get it to its latest settings and features. We'll go through those features and we'll move on with the review. Okay, so Anbernic have a website that you can go to download firmwares. It's a separate website, so I'll put the link in the description below. So you just want to scroll down and you choose your RG35XX. It's got the latest updates, so it's right on top of the list. And you want to get this latest one, the 221223. 23rd of the 1222 is the 12th of the 1222, so you want this one at the top here. So I can't seem to get it to click, so I just copy and paste this link here. So go directly to that Google Drive folder, and you want this. This RG35XX EN221223 RAR, and you want to download that. I have downloaded this already, but I'm just going to take you through the motions. They do provide a flasher, so this thing here is what you can use to flash to your SD card. I'm not going to use that. I use something called Bellina Etcher. I'll put the link to that in the description below as well. Now, once you have it downloaded, you want to go to that file and you want to unzip it using 7-zip. I'll put the link to 7-zip in the description below as well. I'm going to extract that. So this will just extract it to your downloads folder. So now what you want to do is open Bellina Etcher, which is another app that I will link in the description below. Flash from file. So what you want to do here is look for the file in the downloads folder. It's already gone to my downloads folder. And there it is. It's an image file. You'll see that disk image file. So you just want to click on that, make sure it is the correct one, the 221223 one. Open it. And then select target. You need to be very careful now. I currently have 2 SD cards plugged into my device. They recommend a 64 gig card. I'm guessing because they've set this up specifically to open up a partition for ROMs. So I would say just go with that. Just do the 64 gig card as they recommend. Just make sure you select the correct card because you will format whatever's on there. So select and flash. Say yes. And this is going to take a while. We'll just speed it up in the edits. Okay, that is done. All right, that was very quick actually. Now what you want to do is, I think Bellina Etcher ejects it already. So I'm just going to remove that card from my device. All right, so Bellina Etcher is going to eject your card from your device. So however you've inserted your card, just unplug it and reinsert it into the machine. the way that this is being created, it's going to create a whole lot of little partitions on your card. So don't get confused by that, or if any errors come up in your computer, just ignore them or say cancel. Now what I want you to do is to open or download an app called Mini Partition Wizard. I'm not sure of a Mac equivalent of this. You'll just have to do a bit of a Google search. But this for me has always been a useful tool when I can't format something or I can't get to something on an SD card. This always shows it here. Now what you need to do is just at the bottom here, you'll see here are all the disks and drives currently plugged into my computer. That's my computer. That's my extra NVMe drive. So you don't want to fiddle with those. There's a 60 gig card. It's the only 60 gig card plugged into my computer, so I know it's that. And then if you look to the right here, you'll see unallocated. It might be called something else on your machine. They might have named it something when doing the installation, but on mine it says unallocated. I'm going to select that. So what you want to do is on this, you say right click. This might be not exactly the way your computer reacts. It just depends. But you need to say create. So we're going to create a new partition for the ROMs in this unallocated area of the card. For some reason, the way that this is set up, it doesn't do it on its own when you install it into the device. I've already tested this. So you have to actually create it yourself. It says Windows isn't going to read it. Just say yes. Now the partition label, you're going to call it ROMs in all caps. Create as primary is fine. The file system needs to be FAT32. All right. Now we just say OK. Now it's going to set it to FAT32, as you can see here. And on the left-hand side, you want to say apply. So whatever tool you're using, you need to apply your changes. We say apply pending changes. Close all applications. Well, I can't close the applications that are currently running. Let's just close my browser. It closes all applications just to be safe that those apps aren't using the SD card that you're currently trying to format. So just say yes. Let it do its thing. It shouldn't take too long. Okay. Now for some reason, and I don't know if this is going to happen to you, you'll see it's been formatted to FAT32, but it doesn't have the ROMs label. So this is going to make it difficult to use now with the next step that I want to do. So we need to label this. So if you have this issue, just do this. Right click and say label and say ROMs. Say OK. Say apply. Say yes. Should be a quick little fix. There we go. Let's go out of this. Yes. And now what I'm going to do is I'm removing the original SD card, the one that came with the device, the 64 gig card that came with the device. I'm removing it from here. I'm going to use a SD card reader, and I'm going to copy all the ROMs from this and the BIOS files to my new card. So I've got my new firmware with all the ROMs and BIOS files that they gave us with the system. This does get a little bit confusing because you've now got two cards that look almost identical. Let's just close all of this. We just ignore all of this and we open two new File Explorer folders. I'm just going to do a split screen thing here. The way that we'll be able to see it is this one has no ROMs and this one should have all the ROMs. There we go. So now we've located, okay, this is the new one because it has nothing in it. And this is the old one, or the original one, that has everything in it. And you'll notice here on the right-hand side that it has a BIOS folder. So if you are into this and you want to get some BIOS files, this is where to put them. I'm just going to say Control A. I'm going to select everything here, and I'm going to drag it over to this ROMs folder. This is going to take a while, obviously, because it's nearly 60 gigs of ROMs. Okay, so now that that is done, we eject the card from the laptop. Let's just do that. There we go. Okay, so we're going to install the SD card back into the device. This is the new SD card that I've formatted and added everything to. Okay, just to note that I have installed BIOS files in here. You know, there's a whole legal thing around BIOS files, but What I can tell you is get some good BIOS files and put them on your device because it will improve gameplay. All right, so let's quickly check. All the games are here. Yes, all the games are on the device. So let's quickly check the features now that were promised that would improve the system. So one of the things we couldn't do was control like integer scaling of our games. So let's have a look and see. Let's go into a Game Boy Advance game here. Okay, so herein lies the first problem I have with this is, okay, so they've introduced bezels, but I really don't like these bezels. You know, with this, there's the buttons and the D-pad here and start and select and then a power thing here and the Nintendo there. It's very odd to me. I really don't like it. You might like it, but it is there. So there are bezels available. They are now available under video display effects. It's as an overlay. We now have full screen. We now have aspect, which enlarges it to the screen but keeps the aspect ratio of the original game. And then 1:1 is integer scaling, but as you can see, it's quite small on the screen. But if you're a purist, that is there for you. And then there's full screen, which on this screen does look quite good. You know, full screen, you're using the full width of the screen, and I really like that. But I'm probably going to leave it on aspect. But now what happens is these are universal, so that is going to keep it throughout the system. So aspect ratio is a good one to choose. And then we've got dot matrix, HD, scanline 1, scanline 2, fast, which it looks pixelated, but it looks kind of almost like the original game to my eye. And then dot matrix is nice to have throughout as a universal sort of retro look. HD smooths it out, which I really don't like. It's like a shader. And scanline 1 and 2, they're just very slightly different. You're not going to see it on the screen now. But they, if I go, integer scaling, you'll see it more. You're really not going to see it on the screen now, but the scan lines are just ever so slightly different on each. So these are closer together, and then these scan lines are slightly further apart. So it just depends on how you want that to look. I'm going to leave this on aspect, leave that on dot matrix. Okay, so I want to quickly show you the overlays. So if we go to Game Boy, you see we've still got black and white, and there is no, there's nothing here to change it to the green that I like. So it's still not quite as I wanted. You got dot matrix, which is what a Game Boy was originally, was a dot matrix screen. So that gives it that effect. And then you can set this to integer scaling, which is quite nice for the Game Boy games. But as I say, black and white's not ideal. And then the overlay. I'm not a fan of that. You know, this overlay, like with the Game Boy written there and the power and then the buttons here, for me it's messy and sort of not very well designed. So I'm quite keen to see if I can improve on that. Maybe I can find my own bezels to put in there. Then Game Boy Color, it's kind of the same story, you know, just a bit over the top. If you might enjoy this, depending on the color of the device that you bought, it might look good on the gray, I don't know. But to my eye, I really don't like this. I'm not a fan. And here again, we have all those options under video display effects. Now these features do not appear on all the systems. So to give you an example, if we're going to SNES, the only thing we have is video display effects. There's no aspect ratio options. However, this does look quite good. With the dot matrix and the full size screen, this is actually looking pretty good. But, you know, again, if you're a purist, that is going to bug you. Same story with Mega Drive. Now, with Mega Drive, I don't think it is 1:1 integer scaling. But we only have the video display effects here and no aspect ratio options. This really does look like integer scaling. I mean, it is as close as it can be. So Mega Drive on this device really does look stunning. Yeah, this is excellent. This is actually really, really nice. As I play it, I'm realizing this is lovely. And so this doesn't have any aspect ratio options, but with my dot matrix and just running it as it is, it looks really good. So just to mention again, those settings are throughout the system. So whatever game you're in, you set it to a certain aspect ratio, a certain video display effects, it sticks with it throughout the system. But the one thing that you have going for you in the way that they've set this up is no matter where you're playing, this menu button will always work. And so you've got easy access to, while you're playing, going, oh, I don't like the dot matrix, I want scanline, and go out and carry on playing. That is available throughout, whether you're busy playing a game, whatever. There aren't a lot of operating systems that can actually boast that, a universal button that is controllable throughout the system. So that is very nice, and I really like that about the way Anbernic have set this up. Another thing to mention is that in PS1, but we do have CD control. So if you do need to swap the CD, you just go in your change CD image, and the CD images will appear there. So that is a good new feature, because that is actually a necessary feature for playing PS1 games. And as I mentioned, my recommendation is to set the games up in such a way that you have default dot matrix and default aspect. And then if you are in Game Boy and you want it to be integer scaling, just set it to 1:1 when you go in there. But the dot matrix aspect ratio for me is a universal setting that will look good for all your retro games. So let's run through the standout features for this device. It does have a quick sleep mode, so you just press the button. I'm not sure if that just switches the screen off or what it does, but it is there. The other thing that I really like is this. You simply press and hold the power button, it switches off. It doesn't start up where you left off like Onion OS, but that, press and hold power down. It's not available on a lot of devices, and that's such a simple thing that will help people who've never used these things before. It's not a fiddly thing to go, oh shit, but how do I power this thing down? What buttons do I press, Again, there's the universal menu button, which if you press it, shutdown is right there. So very, very straightforward. Again, to mention this menu button, it is very user-friendly. Being able to press anytime in a game and have control is very useful. So whenever you're in a game and you need to access, sometimes it's got BIOS control. It's, there's the BIOS control. I can change which BIOS it's using. I can set the brightness. I can set the video display effects aspect ratio on some of the systems, change my CD, save, load. Everything is there in one place. With a lot of these custom firmware, some of these things get a little bit technical, whereas this is just super straightforward, and I really like that about this. Your save games, you've got 5 slots to save, so you can, there we go. So 5 slots to save, which is not, that's kind of quite limited compared to, RetroArch, but it does have 5 save states. And then shortcuts. There are no shortcuts, like I'm used to pressing select R1 to save while I'm in a game. That's not available in here. There are no shortcuts. The shortcut is press the menu button and everything is there, which in and of itself is actually a good thing, especially for newcomers to the hobby. Okay, so I've got these 3 set to the absolute brightest, and these on-screen demos of the displays are never really very good because I can't 100% tell you or show you on the cameras because it's translating onto YouTube. There's compression, all sorts of things. So I'm just going to try my best to explain to you which one I think is better, or pros and cons of each. Now, these screens are the same size and they look very, very similar. To my eye, I cannot see the difference. For some reason, I do prefer the screen on the RG351V, and I can't quite put my finger on it. It seems more fluid. So maybe it is a better screen. Let's switch off the dot matrix here. So between these two, suddenly I've always thought this is an even color, but this one suddenly seems a little bit bluer than this one. This one seems a little bit more saturated. So this one does seem a little bit more saturated, but again, this one just seems more fluid, a nice fluid look to it. This is just a slightly more fluid screen. The pixels are probably smaller and more dense than this one, but very, very close. Slightly warmer tone on this one. But yeah, so close, so damn close. Overall, I prefer this screen. It seems to pop more. Okay, I'll just switch integer scaling off here just so that I can compare them a bit. It's so close. The blues are very similar. Sometimes this seems more saturated. Sometimes this seems more saturated. It really isn't a fair fight in terms of a winner. I think these are both great, great screens. Okay, then moving over to these two. Obviously, this is a lot smaller. But the thing with the Miyoo Mini is this is at its brightest, and it isn't as bright as the RG35XX. And the problem I have with this is it also in dark rooms doesn't get dim enough. I was playing this at night last night. It doesn't get very dim in a very dark room, but it gets dim enough to be able to use it. This one is very bright in a dark room. This has got a greener tone. This is a much more even color to this one. I know that there are settings in here to set the white balance and everything, but you know, straight out the box, you know, I loaded Onion OS on here and didn't tweak it. Between these two, this is definitely better. I could probably tweak this to be similar, but you know, at the end of the day, I've got 3 devices with exceptional screens for what they are. You know, this is retro gaming, and we're talking about up to PS1 gameplay, and all 3 of these are just exceptional. I don't want to go and say one is better than the other. I do think this one is lacking a little bit in color balance, and I think they've even tweaked from here to here to get this one perfect. I do think this, maybe I'm wrong, maybe it's exactly the same screen, but this does somehow seem a little bit better. The blacks are more rich, like you can see these blues are very rich and dense. And so maybe the pixels are denser, better quality pixels. But yeah, I think if I had to grade these, this is the best, this is the next one up, and this is the next one up. And you know, we started with this. When I got this, I was blown away by the screen. And, you know, spoiled for choice. Okay, so a quick run through the main menu. We've got battery, which gives us our capacity, like how much battery we've got left, the voltage, so basically how the battery's doing. We can shut down from here. We can set the date and time, which I still need to do. We can test our buttons, so if you're having any issues, you can, you can test your buttons here. You can even test your diagonal. I don't know how you would set it if there is a problem, but you can check there. It's got a pretty good spread on that. Button sound, you can have button sound on this, which is super annoying. So I wouldn't have that on here. We've got our icon settings. So I already tweaked this before I started the review, but that is your default icons. And you've got these, you've got these. There's quite a few to choose from here. I just liked the sort of minimal one like that. You can change your background now. There is an option to add your own, so you just got to see what size these images are, and you can add them when you plug in your, I think it's on your SD card, but yeah, on the SD card you can go have a look around there and put your backgrounds in there. Language setting, there's a couple of languages available. Schedule power off, close open. What I think this means is if it's open, it's going to power off after a certain period of time. I don't know what that period of time is. Backlight time, this is how long it's going to take for the backlight to switch off. So that's also a power saving feature. Backlight brightness, let's just dim that a bit. You can customize your buttons. I don't want to fiddle around there just yet. Clearing history, so you can clear the history of the games you've played. You can clear the favorites. So I like to keep my favorites neat of the games I'm busy playing. So if you need to clear that, you can. If you fiddled with the BIOS, which BIOS works, which BIOS you've chosen to work with the game, you can clear that as well if you're having any gameplay issues. And then when you're in your games, to create a favorite, so if you're in here, I've already favorited this Street Fighter Alpha, you press start and it creates it, so there, and when I start it, it appears in the favorites here. There it is. And then just to review this one more time, when you're in a game, I've also tested the HDMI out and it works pretty much perfectly. I have a pixel map on my screen, on my TV screen, a 1:1 pixel perfect aspect ratio from here. And if I set that to the video display effects to fast, it actually looks really good on the TV screen. So that's just a tip for HDMI, just to set that to fast and you're going to get a nice look on your TV screen. Okay, I've switched the limiter off on this mic of mine that I use, and I'm going to do an audio test. Set the volume to max. Okay, so in terms of overall audio quality, it's pretty like obvious. The RG351V was the best with zero crackling. This had a little bit of distortion as soon as the logo came in, you know, when the music started playing here. And this, I don't know what happened with the little sparkles as the logo starts loading, but this is a lot thinner. So with this, you've got a very high-end sound, so your mid-range is only starting to creep in, whereas this has got a lot of mid-range and a little bit of bass, and this has got quite an even spread. All these are obviously very tinny, you know, they've just got one little speaker in them, but this is the smaller speaker, medium speaker, larger speaker, and you can actually see the big diaphragm in the speaker if you look inside. So, you know, it was kind of expected. What is interesting is that at this price point, this is the same price as the Miyoo Mini, and it has better sound, better build quality, bigger screen. So, you know, if we're just looking at price, we're ignoring the fact that this is bigger than the Miyoo Mini. You really are getting a lot for your money. So I'm not a big fan of doing a lot of gameplay on my videos because there's so many guys doing tests, like testing all the different games on all the different devices. So you can search them on YouTube if you really want to see a specific game played on this device. I'm sure that the videos will come out soon enough. But needless to say, after extensive testing, you know, Game Boy, Game Boy Advance, Game Boy Color, they're all going to play fine. Neo Geo Pockets, all those platforms. Obviously, Game Gear is going to be fine. Mega Drive, Sega Genesis is going to play fine on the system. Plays fine on almost every system. But, you know, the thing is, it goes right up to PS1. It plays arcade games quite well, which my RG350M struggles with a bit. Plays arcade games very well. And then all the way up to PS1. It plays PS1 flawlessly. I mean, I tried Silent Hill. I tried, what's my other favorite game? Resident Evil 3. And they play flawlessly. But so far, everything plays flawlessly all the way up to PS1. And so if custom firmware comes along, maybe we'll get, you know, gameplay on other platforms as well. But for a $50 device to play everything up to PS1 flawlessly, there hasn't really been anything that does that. The Miyoo Mini doesn't play all the PS1 games. It plays them like sort of. It plays maybe 60 to 70% of the PS1 catalog, if that, whereas this is going to play absolutely everything. So for a $50 device to do what this device does, that really is saying a lot. So if you picked up this device as a new user, and if you're an older user as well, if you're someone who's not interested in Dreamcast and PSP and stuff like that, this device is for you. It plays everything that, in my mind, is retro gaming. You know, all the other platforms, I'm a bit older now, I'm 42, so for me, those are all newer platforms. You know, Dreamcast, I never got into Dreamcast, I never got into PSP, because I was in university by then, I wasn't playing games anymore. So, you know, $50, playing so many platforms, this really is a great deal. And a lovely screen on top of it all. So yeah, just to reiterate this, the RG350M, which I know is an older device, but it is more powerful than the RG350M. I paid, I think, $100 for this device. For this to beat this in every regard and to be half the price, obviously you can get this on special now, but for half the price new, that is really great. You know, technology's moved on and now we can get a compact device that plays everything up to PS1 perfectly. And also nice to see that Anbernic have come along and brought out a stock firmware that isn't half bad. So why is the retro gaming community annoyed by this device? The reason is, you know, devices like the RG351V got a lot of flack because the firmware coming out of this device, the stock firmware on this device, was quite bad. And developers came along and they saved this device and made it the incredible device that it is today. And now Anbernic came along and said, sorry, the firmware on this is closed. It's not an open source firmware. And so no one is able to develop anything, you know, substantial for this. I know Black Seraph brought out RetroArch for this, which is great. So for the tinkerers, it's wonderful. But still for ease of use, this still is the best firmware available for this today. Hopefully, you know, Onion OS is an OS that runs on top of the stock firmware on here. Hopefully someone is going to do that for this because it really deserves something like Onion OS. But as it stands, it is pretty good. But the reason why the community is upset is because the community has driven Anbernic to where they are today. The reason their devices were so amazing was because of the developers. And so it's more of a moral high ground to say, you know, after all these years of developing for your device, now the firmware is closed. At least open the firmware to the developers to make us something that's even better than what's on here today. For people who are just starting out, this firmware is wonderful, but for people like myself, the hobbyists, we want a little bit more out of our devices. You know, I'm very particular about my Game Boy experience. For me, this doesn't do that. And so that's why the community is a little bit upset about this device. And then who is this device for? So currently, like I've mentioned many times in this video, this stock firmware is for beginners. It's for someone to pick up and play. And like I said, that's menu system that pops up everywhere throughout the platform. That really does make it easy to use. You know, my kids can use it. I can hand it to a friend and they will be able to follow the menu and everything very easily. So this is definitely for beginners, for newcomers to the hobby. I think people who are in the hobby and have all these custom firmwares, you know what, I think you're still going to enjoy this device. This is going to become your everyday driver because of the size and the quality of the build. If you are into, you know, this is my favorite device, the RG280V. And I want to be realistic because this is my favorite device and this is new and I'm excited about it. But I do think this is probably going to take over as my daily driver because it's compact, it's well made, and I can take it everywhere. And so even if you are really deep in the hobby, I still think go for it, man. Just get the device. I think you're going to love it. I think it's going to be your daily driver for everything up to PS1. So, you know, go for it. So let's quickly do a summary. We're going to put all the text here as I speak and just say a few things. I really like the screen on this device. I think for $50, whether it's better or worse than the RG351V, I'm not sure, but it definitely is a wonderful screen. I think I saw someone comparing it to the 353V, which I unfortunately don't have here, also looked very similar. And so, you know, if on par with all its bigger brothers, it really is an exceptional screen for the money. The build quality is excellent. Like I did that squeeze test, you know, if you squeeze this by the mic, it doesn't make any sound whatsoever. That really is saying a lot. You know, for, again, $50, very well made. And then again to say, up to PS1, seemingly flawless performance. You know, time will tell whether it plays everything perfectly. I mean, I can't play through every single game for the test of this video. And then great color options. I don't know if I've mentioned yet in the video, but I really like this purple. And as I mentioned in the beginning, it seemed white. The reason for that is the PCB is actually white underneath here. And so it doesn't really enhance the color of the purple. But the more I use it, the more I realize, you know, it is a nice purple and I am happy with it. So good color options on this device. You know, you've got the gray, which looks like legit Game Boy vibes. And then you've got the other one, I forget now, the clear, which is really nice. Actually, I'm not a fan of the clear. I like purple and the gray. And then a negative is that for a device that is actually ideal for Game Boy Advance, Game Boy Color, and Game Boy emulation, the bezels, on a Game Boy and Game Boy Color really isn't great. And so I'll probably do integer scaling at black and whites as the thing currently stands, but I'm probably going to try out Black Seraph's Retro Arch to get something that operates nicely for my purposes. Retro Arch is very fiddly compared to this, but I'm used to Retro Arch by now, so I think I'm going to go for that. I wish the aspect ratio and the rendering settings were per console. You know, because now I've given you the dot matrix and aspect as your default settings to use throughout the system. But you know, Game Boy Advance needs the scan lines, and Game Boy needs the dot matrix, and you don't get that. And I would really like to have that to give it the ultimate retro experience. And again, I'm not a fan of the shoulder buttons on this. I think it is a preference thing, but you know, the new 353 design, this design, I don't like it. I much prefer the design they did on the RG351V. I just prefer that raised button format that they did. And then, like I mentioned, this device is not for tinkerers. I think if you get Black Seraph's RetroArch, then maybe, I'm not sure how the gameplay is on there, the performance on that, he hasn't really tweaked it enough. So I'm not sure it's quite ready for everyone. But if you are a tinkerer, get Black Seraph's RetroArch. But as it stands out the box, this is not a tinkerer device. But that does make it nice for you to buy and lend to your friends and all that. So it's not for tinkerers as it stands, but there is Black Seraph's RetroArch. And then obviously an alternative buy is the Miyoo Mini. Now the Miyoo Mini is almost never available. It is more expensive. You can buy this from the Anbernic website. So the $50 does come with a caveat because you do need to pay about $12 shipping. So let's say $50, $62. This, you're not going to get away with shipping and everything, $70. To my country, if you try to buy this on AliExpress, the shipping is about $50. It's ridiculous. So this device basically in South Africa, where I live, is unavailable. We can't get this device anymore. I bought this on Banggood, luckily, but that is no longer a thing. And so in terms of availability for many people around the world, the Miyoo Mini is no longer an option. This thing is always going to be available. And so in terms of alternative buys, this is great. This is a really lovely and special device, but this beats it out in every aspect, price and availability. Then you've got the 353, obviously, which I don't have here, and that is a lot more pricey, but it is more powerful and all that kind of thing. So if you do have the money, obviously the RG353 is a great option, but it is bigger. You've got the 351V, which is massive, so it's a whole different ball game. But this is, again, is more powerful, and it, for playing at home, this I don't like to take it anywhere because it's so big. This is currently my favorite device. I really love this device, and you can get this on special. I bought this on a Black Friday sale for $76, so it brings it really close to this. So this actually is a good alternative. If you're not looking for a tiny device, the 351V might be the option for you in terms of closeness in price. Then you've got the V90, the Pocketty V90. People love to go on my video about the Pocketty V90 on YouTube and defend it. I just think this is one more nail in the coffin for the V90 because it's better made, more powerful, does everything better than the V90, and it is nearly the same price. Obviously the V90 people can find for these crazy deals, but I really think this is the final nail in the coffin. The V90 is way worse than this in every aspect. The GKD Mini that just came out, there's a new one out, that I think is more expensive. Also closed firmware, so that is a close competitor. So I will put that on the screen now with the price for you to consider. Once again, just like the RG351V, the 353V is kind of competing with this, but this still has a place in the market. They've found a device that is a unique place in the market and is perfect for so many different people for so many different reasons. There's a good price, it's very well made, it's a nice size so you can still stick it in your pockets, and it's got a beautiful screen. The only real big downsides is this D-pad is not the best D-pad I've ever experienced in the Anbernic stable. Something about it makes it difficult to do Street Fighter games and that sort of thing, and that's really the only big downside. And then obviously the firmware, some people hate it. I'm saying that this firmware is perfect for most people. It really is an exceptional device, and I'm going to put this down as the best small device. They just made it into 2022, the best small device of 2022, and I'm interested to see if anyone can do a better device for just the same price in 2023. I think this one is going to stand the test of time and be a really good device for a really long time.